Hello, Jeff Sauer here, and I want to talk to you about how do you project your marketing budget for 2016 and beyond. We're going to use some awesome tools like SimilarWeb, Google Analytics, and quite a few more in order to get to this point. So let's start with the rhetorical question. Who wants to kill it in 2016 and maybe 2017? Me, you, we all do, right? But is that really what's going to happen? Is that our reality, that we're going to just kill it magically, things are going to happen? No. What's probably going to happen is we're going to be fighting for budget scraps. We're going to think that we're going to do this amazing high budget film like Life of Pi, but really we're probably not going to have enough budget to even do a low rent version of that. That's just how the reality is with our marketing efforts, and that's just how it works. Budgets, huh? Yeah, budgets are annoying to me too, and they had been annoying for quite some time. It turns out we're going to need a bigger budget. So let's visit our finance department and see what they have to say about this bigger budget we're looking for. And maybe before we go in there, we ask really nicely, just give me your budget. Give me as much budget as you can give me. This is how most of us sort of go in there as marketers, trying to ask for budget, sort of act like cowboys as if as if they owe it to us, or maybe even like bandits. And then finance is all like, okay, well, what is this budget going to do for me? It's a question that you're going to get from finance every single time. Like, what is the budget going to do for me? And then you go back to your desk and you create this growth chart, and you think that it's perfect. It's the best growth chart in the history of charts. It's maybe got a few spikes and things like that. And we project things and we're like, well, looking at this chart, this is probably the most amazing thing that's ever happened in the history of marketing. All we need is a little bit of money and this magic's going to happen. And then finance is probably like, okay, well, I'm a little skeptical of your numbers. Where did you get these things? Where do these numbers come from? What's the reality that you're based on? Has that ever happened to you? It's happened to me many times. I go through this really crazy process of creating an awesome projection and spend a lot of time working on it. And then, no, I get the hammer dropped down on me just like everybody else. Well, and we get pretty upset. Maybe we even cry, talking about how finance hates us and how they don't think that we have what it takes, or that they just don't want to make an investment in us. That used to happen to a guy that I know. I'm not going to tell you who it is. But some guy that I know, that used to happen to him all the time, until he finally got fed up with hearing no and decided to make some adjustments to his approach. And today I want to talk about those adjustments that were made to that approach. First, let's start with another rhetorical question. Do you want to start hearing yes more often? Of course you do. Today we're going to discuss what you can learn from competitive intelligence tools, how using that competitive data can help you build your own models, how you can project the value of increased marketing budgets, and we're going to talk about how do we make a compelling argument for bigger budgets. And before we get too far into this, I just wanted to give a quick resource mention, the periodic table of Google Analytics. Now, I've created this periodic table of Google Analytics in order to help understand and explain everything that happens within the world of Google Analytics, and we're going to be using that to explain what we're talking about here as well. And so if you want to learn more about that, you can just go to jefflytics.com to check it out. So the first thing I want to talk about is competitive intelligence. Competitive intelligence plays a really big role in our ability to project our budget, because we need to know what competition's doing, and we need to estimate the value of their efforts in order to get our own adoption. And so the first tool we're going to use for this is Google Analytics to get some ideas as to what we can look at here. So in particular, we're going to look at the benchmark reports in Google Analytics. And this is a tool that you do need to configure within your own data and your own website. If you check this box for benchmarking, then you're going to find that your account has these benchmarking reports enabled. You choose your industry vertical, and then you also can choose your location and the size of your website. And when you put that in place, you can start comparing. You can compare yourself to others in your peer set. And it's going to give you the answer to some questions you might have. For example, do you want to know how you're doing within your organic search program? Do you have more traffic than your competitors do from organic search? Do you have less traffic? Is it one of your strengths? Is it one of your weaknesses? And how are you comparing? So this is nice to know our own organic search traffic, and anybody who's looked at Google Analytics definitely looks at their own traffic. But have you ever thought to take it a step further and compare yourself to your peers, to your competition set? And what you'll find is one of two things. You'll find that either you're doing really well and you are the market leader, or you're the one who's ahead of everybody else, which is the example here, or you're going to find that you're the market laggard. You're not doing very well at all. So here's an example of somebody who's not really taking any advantage at all of their email program. Then also there's times where we're just not doing any advertising at all. We're not even It's not that we're not comparing to our competition, we're just doing nothing at all. And so there's opportunities here. Now, you might look at a business and you might say, okay, well, we've gotten this far. We've gotten a lot of traffic to our website without doing any paid advertising. What's the point of doing paid advertising? Well, you never know until you, one, compare what you're doing to others, and then you use that information to come up with ideas for how you might come about and attack the market into the future. And so having this data to see how your competitors are doing might help you identify a weakness in your strategy. Because there are a lot of weaknesses in strategies, right? There's a lot of times where we go with what's working in one area and we think, okay, well, we've earned a lot of our media, we've earned a lot of attention, why would we pay for it? That might be the wrong question. The right question might be, well, look at how far we've gotten with these free sources. Maybe if we put a little bit of money into paid, we can double our traffic. We can get that much further ahead of the competition. And that's really the type of focus that you can apply once you get into competitive intelligence and competitive analysis. Here's another story. Maybe you have not invested in your mobile site whatsoever. Maybe you think that your website's doing just fine without any mobile, and then you look at the competition and you see, okay, well, we are still ahead of them from a desktop perspective, and we're doing better than them on tablets. We're doing better than them in many ways, but we're missing a huge opportunity when it comes to mobile. And the story here might not be that mobile is going to double our traffic, but the story might be that you're missing 500,000 visits because you're missing out on mobile. If you're doubling your competition in every other way, but yet on mobile you're half the competition, there's an opportunity for you to get 3 times more traffic if you just made some kind of focus, because that's what the industry is showing you. That's what these benchmarks are showing you. And it's not just Google Analytics that provides this level of insight. For those of you who have ever heard of SimilarWeb and use their Pro tool, there's some really cool benchmarking things we can do here. You can do industry level benchmarks. So here's an example of the marketing and advertising industry. You can see the average type of traffic that comes to websites, total number of visits, and you can even get down into the subcategories and the subgenres to figure out what's happening there. And then if you drill down, you can see what's the traffic patterns for people in these industries. Is it search, just like if our website's very search heavy, then is it the same with the rest of the websites out there, or are we an anomaly, or are we the trendsetter? You can look at these reports and start to get at that information as well. And the more you drill down into these tools, the more you can find out whether you are unique or if you're not doing as well as other people. And there's a lot you can figure out from this level of competitive analysis. And what we can do here is we can create some good stories, but we're still leaving ourselves with a lot of questions. And those questions often get around to more specific things. So what about specific competitors? How are we doing compared to specific competitors that are out there? Well, that's where we get into tools like traffic comparison, where we look at the traffic for specific named competitors and figure out how we're doing compared to them. Because this type of specific information really is important to forming our thesis that we need a bigger budget. And so let's go back to SimilarWeb and we can look at and see how are we doing for website rankings. How many visits are coming to our website? How is this happening over time? You can compare this data to your own Google Analytics account or Adobe Analytics, whatever you're using. You can compare these pieces of data to say, does this make sense? Is this what we're expecting here? Is this really aligned with what we're looking for? And then you can say, okay, I want to now compare my website. We're using lynda.com as an example. I want to compare my website to other websites in this industry, other websites that do something similar. And so you can add up to 5 competitors within this tool, or 4 other competitors. And then you can say, okay, well, so now that we have understood our traffic and we can see that SimilarWeb is a pretty good idea as to how much traffic is going to our website, how does that compare us to our competition? And so you can say, okay, we're doing better than most. We're doing just as well as Toots Plus, we're doing well there, but Udemy is doing much better than we are. This is the type of comparison you can make by using these competitive analysis tools, especially SimilarWeb, because it does give you some really cool insights and visualizations here. And so you can immediately see, yes, we are doing just as well as some competition. We're falling behind compared to the market leader. We're only half as much traffic, even though we're busting our butt in order to do these marketing efforts. And if you're busting your butt to do marketing efforts and you're still only at half the traffic of the competition, that's when the budget piece comes in. Maybe the last thing you need to fill that equation, the last thing that you need in order to get the results you're looking for, is to ask for more budget. And so this is a compelling story here to say, okay, we're doing the most we can with what we have. We've stretched all of our resources thin. We have a really strong marketing strategy. Now we just need to scale up. Because budget, in some ways, is just a way of scaling up, because we are getting more resources, we're paying for exposure. We're doing some of these things that we had never imagined when we were just focused on ourselves. But now that we're looking at how we're doing compared to our competition, we can get a better understanding of how overall traffic trends are working. And then we can start drilling into some of these traffic sources and see, okay, is this really the distribution we're looking for? So that distribution of traffic sources is nice when you look at it from an industry perspective or for an individual site. But how are others doing comparatively speaking? Are they doing as much with paid media? Is it all coming in through organic? How is this happening? And as you can see, there's some sites that are making it up entirely based on organic search. That's how they're doing it. They give away free materials and they get a lot of traffic coming in from organic search. That can tell you one thing, and that is, in this case, that there's a lot of opportunity and missed opportunity when it comes to organic search. When you look at your budget as lynda.com, who is the example we have here, and you want to see how they're doing compared to Toots Plus, who has a little bit more traffic, it turns out that most of the difference between traffic is really coming from organic search. So there's a huge opportunity here just from looking at this chart in order to get results from organic search. And then you can see is that Udemy, who is the market leader in getting the most traffic, they percentage-wise do not rely nearly as much on organic search. So you can answer questions like, is organic search still a viable way for us to drive traffic to our site? Is anybody else doing organic search? What type of traffic are they getting when we drill down and we look at them specifically? Are they getting a lot of traffic from organic search? And then you can start to set your expectations accordingly. And so the expectations I can get just from this slide alone, just from this slide, which is a gold mine of information, is two. One is that there's people who are our same size who are making up a lot of traffic by purely doing organic search, and that is the case of Toots Plus here. The other thing we can learn is that there's people who are bigger than us who rely on organic search about as much as we do, and it's still the same percentage. So our concentration of organic search is about average compared to most of the competitors, but then there's one competitor who's really excelling here. And then the other thing you can gain from that is maybe it helps you understand how you can make up that gap, because we do perceive that we have a gap here between us and our competition. Well, maybe the way that we make up that gap is through organic search. The other thing you can look at here is see where nobody's competing at all, and then say, okay, well, is there an opportunity here? Is there an opportunity to make it up in cheap display ads? Is there an opportunity to make it up in paid search? And is there an opportunity in social? You can look at these unused strategies and see if there's an opportunity there as well. And all this comes from just one simple chart where you're comparing yourself to others. And then the other thing that's nice about this is that you can use these charts in order to have a common picture for your organization, so everybody can look at the same thing. And when they're looking at the same thing, can come to the same conclusions. Now, I'd obviously recommend that you draw those conclusions for the organization whenever possible so you get the results you're looking for. Who's investing in social? So this is just drilling down into that report we talked about with social. Is there an opportunity here? Well, when you look at this chart, you might think, okay, well, there's not much of an opportunity for us in social, maybe just 1 million visits. But then you think about it logically, and it's like, okay, that's 1 million visits. There's a ton of opportunity. 1 million a month, that's 12 million people over the course of a year if we give more concentration to social media. And so that starts to open up opportunities and ways of thinking that maybe you didn't even imagine. You didn't really think social media. It's like, man, we spent all of our effort getting to the point where we have 1 million visitors from social media a month. And that might be the victory that your team had. That might be something that made you get promoted. That might be the moral victory of the year for you and your team. But the thing that you don't realize when you're only looking at your own data is that there's somebody who's now at 2 million. And so even though you've worked your butt off in order to get this thing to work, the gap might be getting bigger. And also what you're learning is that there's a lot more room for you to improve, and there's a lot more traffic for you to go after. And so when you look at it from this perspective, we might have been satisfied with getting to that 1 million run rate. It might have taken us 5 years to get there. But then you can realize by looking at this is that there's somebody who's even further ahead. And so it sets the bar even higher for where you're going to go. Now, the other thing to think about when we look at these reports and this data is, okay, well, say that we built up our social media program over 5 years and we spent a lot of effort in order to get there. Okay, we put a lot of effort in to get to that point with our social media program. We got everything going with our current team. It may take increased budget in order to get to the point where you're doubling the traffic. But now that you've gotten to the point where you can prove that you can do social media well, the budget can be well founded. You can say, if we want to beat our competition, we need to spend more money. We need to do more efforts with social. This is the type of report that nobody can deny, and that is if your competitor is doing twice as much traffic as you, an example here with Udemy, then how do we do what Udemy is doing? And it is usually going to come down to a budgetary and resources question, and that's how you can go out and get more resources. Same with display. So we're looking at display here, and you can see that there's some people who are doing that foray in display. As I talked about earlier, the question can often be, is there room for us to play within display advertising? Is there a display opportunity for us? Well, we don't really know that until we look at it from two perspectives. One is, what is everybody else doing? So you can see here that there is a display opportunity, or at least they're taking a chance on it, and the Udemy website. The other thing is there an opportunity for us to take it up to 1 million visits, 2 million visits? Paid advertising is often the way that you can scale up your efforts. So you can put a lot of efforts into getting people to come to your website and getting traffic, but it's those paid efforts that usually are what help you scale up to the next level. And this can help you prove that out by looking at things like display ads or paid search, where you do have to pay money in order to play. And the other thing that's cool is you can even look at your mobile results and do a comparison on mobile as well. So how are we doing compared to the others when it comes to mobile? Are we falling behind? Are we doing better? And you can get more specific data. Now, when you marry this data with your own analytics and also the benchmarking reports from Google Analytics, now we have a pretty good idea as to what the mobile landscape looks like. Are we going to be able to play there? Should we even try to play there in the mobile landscape? And this is really how you answer that question, by looking at reports like the SimilarWeb mobile report and seeing how are we doing compared to our competition. And then probably most importantly, when you look at this, in order to get an idea for budget, is we need to know what people are spending. And so we looked at Google Analytics, which doesn't really tell us what people are spending. SimilarWeb does have some data about marketing spend, but I would say that for all of us, we want to get as much data as we can on what people are spending for marketing. So let's look at some spend comparison tools. For those of you who are into search, if you want to look at paid and organic search, I really like SEMRush as a tool that helps us understand how much people are spending with search. So you can look at the search estimate tool here and figure out both the value of the traffic that's going to a website, and then get down into what the traffic actually costs for somebody to get to that point. How much does it cost in order to generate that traffic? How much would it cost for us to generate that traffic? We're talking about hundreds of thousands of dollars per month. Not only that, but we can get into what keywords we find them bidding on, how much volume there is per month in those searches, and then what their average per click cost is. You can see if there's any opportunities for you, if there's expensive areas that you need to focus on, or if there's areas that are high value. A lot of times the brand keywords don't cost as much as specific terms around specific products and services that you're going after. And so you can get some granular data with this tool, and then you can export that into the Google Adwords tool and see really what the landscape looks like. And then you can use your data from SimilarWeb. So there's a similar report within SimilarWeb that gives you an idea as to how much search volume is happening for these keywords, what the average cost per click is, and then you can take these terms, export it into an Excel file or a CSV file, combine them all, and get a really good idea as to what people are spending in these areas. And so there's a lot of tools you can use out there in order to get data on what people are spending within paid media. Also one called SpyFu. I like SpyFu because it basically says here's what we think they're spending on AdWords. We think they're spending $300,000 each month in AdWords based on our data, and so you can just get at that number. Now there's a few ways to get at these numbers. One is they just hit you over the head with it, like what SpyFu does here, and they just say here's what we think the number is. And that's really valuable to get these numbers that are just laying it out for you, is to say what they think the value is. But then there's also the other tools where you can export the data and come up with your own models. Now, what's the answer? Well, I think that there's a few things. Do you want a short answer? Do you want that hitting you over the head compelling case that you're going to deliver to your company? Or do you want to do a more research-backed opinion as to what you think is going to happen here? And I would say that there's room for both in any type of marketing analysis. And depending on the size of your company, depending on how much budget you're asking for, you might need to do these really granular exports and then use that data in order to come up with the values that you're looking for. That's actually a pretty common thing that ends up happening when you have a lot at stake. So the more at stake you have, the more work you're going to have to do. And hopefully you should have enough resources in order to get to that point. But one thing I'll find is that asking for budget is usually not something that is resourced appropriately, and that is because asking for a budget is not a marketing activity. So you might be focused more on generating that, how we talked about, going from 1 million social visitors to 2 million social visitors, as opposed to focused on coming up with a better marketing projection. It's up to you to understand how your company works, how this stuff all plays together, and then to come up with a value that you are most comfortable with. And then there's also one called Moat for display intelligence. If you want to do some more information on display intelligence, I'd recommend you check out Moat as well. So what can we do with all this data? This is the part where we pull it all together into something that's easy to understand, something that's valuable, and something that the math checks out when your finance people look at it. So the first thing I recommend you do is you triangulate your data sources. Now, I'm not sure if you've heard of this concept before, but the thing that is important is that you have multiple data sources and they're all saying something a little bit different. So you need to do a little bit of math, a little bit of algebra, a little bit of calculations in order to get at the real answer that you're looking for. So the first thing is take your own website data from Google Analytics, Adobe Analytics, whatever you're using, and use that as your baseline. Now, the reason why you want your own data in there is because it's undeniable. The data that's in there is something that you collect, and you are very confident in those numbers because you know you've been collecting the right data about your website. But that data alone doesn't give you anything about your competition. So what then I'd say is take your anonymized data, the benchmarks in GA, the industry data from SimilarWeb, anything that's anonymous about an industry, and compare that with your own data and start to see, are there any trends here? How are we doing compared to what the industry shows? Are we the leader? Are we the laggard? How are we doing compared to them? And just establish some context into how you want to look at this data. And the last thing is you want to butt this all up against specific data. So you want to use tools like SimilarWeb, SEMRush, any other competitive intelligence tool which names specific competitors, which names specific companies that you are in competition with, and your own company as well. That's important. You want your own company here as well. You take all these things together and you come up with what you think the right answer is for the traffic of your competition, how much they're spending. You pull together the picture as to what you think is happening in your industry within the competition set. You pull all this together through triangulation. This is something you're probably going to be doing in an Excel spreadsheet. You're going to be taking the numbers from these different tools, putting them in a spreadsheet. You're probably doing that in an Excel spreadsheet, and I'm going to share with you an Excel spreadsheet that you can use in order to do this at the end of this presentation. And then you use it all to project your marketing budget. And when we project our marketing budget, I recommend doing the following. I recommend coming up with a low watermark as to what we think we can do with if we do nothing. If we keep the same budget, what is our low watermark? And this is usually what you're actually currently doing with your marketing efforts. A medium watermark, which is where you say, what is our competition doing? What is the competition doing? You can use these tools that we talked about, some of the spend data we have in order to figure out what our competition is really doing here. And then the high watermark, and this is where we figure out what the market potential is. What if we do everything right? What if everything just clicks? Our marketing is just amazing and everything happens and we dominate the market. What would that scenario look like? And the reason why I recommend doing 3 scenarios is because, one, the only thing you really know is the first part, the low watermark. You can guess as to what the medium watermark is and what the high watermark might be, but really this just helps you do the research in order to give people options, because I really highly recommend that people have options, and I'll show you why those options are good. And then you use that spreadsheet that I was talking about and you come up with real numbers behind the scenes. You say, here's what it looks like with the data that we've collected. And now looking at the expense data from SEMRush, SpyFu, SimilarWeb, you should be able to get at what you think your competitor's budget is. Same with yourself. You can figure out what your budget is for marketing based on your own data. So you'd fill in the left-hand column with your own data. Maybe you don't call it low watermark. Maybe you say my company's budget, as we are right now, and then you maybe name the competitor in the medium one. And then the high watermark is basically saying, if we just go for 10 times what we have right now, or 10 times what we know this market to be, what would that look like? And the reason why you do that is because you want everybody to see what we think we can potentially spend if we were just to take off all governors and all fiscal responsibility. How much money do we think we could spend on marketing? You do the same thing with your revenues. And so you know your own revenue, you know the revenues for your own activities, for your own website. Hopefully you know that, because if you don't know that piece, if you don't know how much money you're making in the online channel, then I guess none of this really matters. You should figure that part out first. But assuming that you know this for yourself, And assuming that you know market rates, you know conversions, you know how much people are charging, and you know even basic conversion rates, you should be able to project how much your competitor is making from the online channel as well. And then the high water mark is basically just taking all your numbers and multiplying it by 10 or some kind of reasonable factor that you would put in there in order to figure out what that ends up being. The more real these numbers are, the better off you're going to be, right? So you want to base this on the real numbers that you have, and you want to put a lot of thought into what you're seeing here. And then this one's easy. You just calculate your profit potential, and that's simply revenue minus expenses. If we put in this revenue number minus our expenses, we predict we're going to get this much profit. Very easy to get at that number, and it's actually the easiest part of the entire spreadsheet. And then the last thing you do is you put it on a chart, because charts are much easier for people to understand. Because you might say, I think we're going to get a little bit of profit with our current budget, but when you put it against and when you compare it against what happens if we do what our competition is doing, what happens if we just go for the moon, now it looks tiny in comparison. And the reason why this chart's important is because it does two things. One is it creates a very compelling visual to say the most profit comes from doing the last two options, either from taking what our competitors are doing and amplifying it, or by just going for the moon. So there's a lot of value in this, and when you're showing this to your organization, the numbers are staggering how much potential value you can have from these two different models. The other thing is that it invokes pricing psychology, and that is when people are looking at three options for when they're going to buy something, they almost always choose the middle one. And so you put the big one on the right-hand side, you put the big watermark in there, nobody's going to go for that. Now people are choosing between doing nothing, which hopefully people don't choose doing nothing even though they might be comfortable with it, or going for the moon, which people aren't usually comfortable with that. Now they're settling in the middle to something that sounds more comfortable, which is much better off than where your budget is right now. That's why we put these options on a graph, because nobody in their right mind is going to choose the moonshot, and then hopefully they're not going to choose the conservative approach either. So they're going to choose something in the middle. Which one would you choose? I would probably choose the middle one, right? Because it's the safest bet, even though, as we said, those of us fighting for budget, it's a much larger budget when we look at the numbers in the spreadsheet. So let's bring this projection back to finance, and let's see how they react. Okay, so 6 months and 10 calls later, they're like, okay, you again? This better be good. Yo, give us more budget and we'll make you $21 million in profit. Here's our research that we have. Here's how we got at this number. We're very confident in this because we've been looking everywhere we possibly can look in order to find this answer. So we really think that we earned the right to have a seat at the table, and we think that we need more budget. This is an investment we want you to make, and we hope you make it with us. And finance loves you. They're like, I'm afraid of emotion, but I want to show you this happy face. And I'm not going to read that second part, but there's some major excitement there. And you might even get promoted. It's like, okay, well, I'm promoted. Now what do I do? And so that's it for our lesson today. I hope that you enjoyed it. If you want to download that spreadsheet, go to jefflytics.com/budget2016. And if you have questions, feel free to email them, jeff@jefflytics.com. Thank you.